credit card processing in the firearms industry has always been challenging because for some reason, all these banks consider it high risk. And I don't understand that. I've got Laura Morgan here with Payroc today, and she has kind of become the industry expert in credit card processing for firearms. So, Laura, what is your experience with this? Why are banks so against firearms dealers who are doing stuff legally when it comes to processing?
It's an interesting topic, certainly. Just maybe starting with giving you a little bit of my background into this industry and kind of taking you on the journey of how I figured all of this out and started to get a better feel and understanding of the pulse on this market with credit card processing, because truly, starting out in maybe about 7 years ago with Payroc, I just happened to stumble across an ammo manufacturer, and I didn't know there was a stigma in the slightest. So I just, treated him like everyone else that came across my plate and signed him up, gave him great rates and service, just my normal run of the mill. And all of a sudden I started getting referrals for other firearms businesses and people that were in his direct network of contacts. And then I signed a few of those, and, so on and so forth. The referrals just kept growing, and here I was. And I, early on recognized that something was going on. So I brought it up to my superiors with Payroc, and they said that they had no issues with it. They had no issues with me kind of diving in deeper and going after it heavily. And, fast forward now, signing 40, 50 new clients a month without even trying, obviously there's a huge problem. I can't profess to be an expert with reading the bank's opinions and, their ideas on why this is a high risk industry or why they have such a hard time supporting it. But at least from Payroc's standpoint, it comes down to lack of understanding. A lot of them are real people that aren't necessarily familiar with firearms, nor maybe are enthusiasts of the industry. And it's just fear of the unknown. They hear about all the controversy in politics and in the media, and I think that just colors their opinions. And these underwriters and these risk folks with the banks, they don't understand how highly regulated of an industry it is. So what I've done was kind of helped educate at least those within Payroc that were in those decision-making positions, and, showed them that, like, firearms transactions are not as easy as you think. You can't just order a firearm online and have it shipped to your doorstep. And unfortunately, that is a popular opinion, that people just truly think that that's the way it works, and it's lack of understanding of the laws. And that's it.
I know when I got started in the industry, I got lucky. I don't use you currently, but I intend to down the road. But a friend of mine locally does credit card processing, and he was able to get me signed up, but I had to sign an addendum about firearms with, and I don't even remember what it said now, but I remember that one condition was, in my case, for my processor, I cannot do online sales. And I thought that was a really weird restriction. They don't care if I sell guns. They care if I ship them to another dealer, which is the only legal way to do it. Like,
right.
Why would somebody put a restriction like that when, like you said, we are so heavily regulated? I mean, the background checks that we go through as a dealer, the audits we go through every 1 to 3 years, if we write something down wrong, they pull our license. I just don't understand why banks don't want our money is really what it comes down to. And that even expands beyond that to just regular bank accounts. There's a lot of big banks that won't even let us keep our money there. And I just don't understand how they view that as a risk.
Yeah, truly I feel the exact same way as you, which is why I got into what I do now and wanted to help change the game on that. But it's truly, I guess it comes down to, I think half of it is political belief, but that's just my opinion. Some of the higher ups just don't want to deal in that space because they don't necessarily support it on a political level. But further than that, I think a lot of them think it's going to be one of these, unfortunate school shooting incidences where they think it's going to somehow be traced back to the credit card processing company or bank that enabled that firearms business to sell that terrible individual a gun, if that's even how it happened, right? We know that bad guys will get guns regardless of the laws in place, and that's why we fight back so hard to protect ourselves. But in the situation, for example, of the shooting that happened recently in Texas, I mean, I say recently, but months ago, but people are still talking about it.
Yeah, and
That
Uvalde.
Yep, and that person bought the firearms that were a very high ticket. And some of the controversial conversations that I had to deal with was, well, if they weren't able to use a credit card to buy those, and so then you start going down the rabbit hole. I don't even want to touch that because they could sit there and try and control people through credit cards, which we've seen the card brands already tried to come out with a new MCC code, and then that got reversed pretty quickly with the backlash. So, I think there are more people that want the money than don't want the money and are happy to support a legal business. But it's to each their own, and they can decide who they want to work with and who they don't. And you know what? There's more and more of me and Payrocs and other people popping up that do want to support, and we will continue to support it. It all comes with education, and that's what I'm trying to focus on too, especially knowing that this is my entire livelihood at stake. If this gets pulled from credit cards, there goes my entire job. And so I just try to keep them educated on all the new laws that are coming into play with the ATF constantly changing things, and helping them understand the nature of a transaction, just like with what you experience with online sales. We don't have any issues with that because we know that legally speaking, you have to ship to an FFL dealer and you have to follow local state restrictions. There are certain states you can't ship certain items to, and even ammo for that matter. You could not have an FFL. You still have to comply in an online e-commerce setting with local state restrictions. So we examine all of that when we're signing up our merchants. We'll take a look at their terms on their website, make sure that they have that language in their shipping policy. And that's what keeps our bank happy and comfortable supporting this space, is knowing that we're doing things by the book and the right way and what's compliant with the ATF at the moment.
You being in the industry, the credit card industry, you may know the numbers more so than me. When it comes to businesses these days, what percentage on average do people do credit card versus cash? I mean, it's got to be kind of crazy on the credit card side because it's so easy. They've made it so easy between Apple Pay, the tapping of the cards. You can have all your cards saved on your cell phone and tap it to a credit card terminal. So, other than the credit card fees, which most people are just kind of accepting of these days, why are they trying to make it harder for people to spend their money? With that kind of stuff, or trying to, like the MCC thing. When that first got announced, my first thought was, what are they going to do with a place like Academy? Like, are they don't, when I sell something, they don't know what I sold. They just know I ran a credit card. Yep. So how are they going to, is everybody that buys anything from a place like that going to be flagged in this system? And maybe that's part of why it got reversed. Maybe those big boxes were like, this is stupid. But
yep.
I just don't get why they're trying to make it harder for the legal people to do stuff, and they don't care about the people that still sell stuff using Venmo and Cash App and the ways that have terms that say you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But there's no oversight there. They're just trying to crimp down on those of us doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that MCC code was just trying to, like, being pressured by, the higher ups in the government, trying to understand the nature of firearm sales and the stats involved. I will tell you that from my experience, there's still way more being spent on credit cards and debit cards than there are in cash. And I tell my dealers too, I'm like, your area better than me. If you're in a smaller town where everyone wants to pay cash, you get those paranoid clients that think that if they spend in cash, they're not going to have any data out there that can be seized by the government. But we all know the ATF can come in at any time and look at those 4473s if they feel so inclined. So, it doesn't do a lot, in my opinion, to prevent any sort of tracking. But that was the thing is even with the new MCC codes, I said from day one, because I had a lot of clients contact me. I had a handful of clients cancel their merchant account because they said, we're done. We're just going cash only. And I said, you're going to hurt your bottom line is what's going to happen. And you're letting them win. You're letting what they want to see happen and in an inadvertent way. And I understand the fear behind it, but on my level, from all the data that I've seen over the years, these merchant category codes just code you as a type of business. Doesn't matter what MCC code you have. It could state a gun store. You can still sell backpacks, pepper spray, accessories, Traegers, smokers, like pellets, whatever. And they don't know what you're buying. They really don't. All we see is an amount and the last four of the card, and that's it. There's not much trackable data there. I guess in my head, what they could potentially do is flag the larger transactions, and just kind of check up on it. But it still comes down to, did the business owner do things by the book? Did they fill out the proper paperwork? Were the background checks done? And in the end, what are they going to do if everything was done by the law? It wouldn't do anything.
And the MCC code for type of business, isn't that what NAICS codes and the SIC codes are for?
Yeah, they're essentially...
It already exists.
Yeah, it already did exist. I think they just decided to create a specific one, but there already was a firearms specific one. People just kept calling me insisting, I want to be listed under sporting goods. And and I think that was kind of blurry too, because how were the card brands going to differentiate between the sporting goods categories and the specific firearms ones?
Right, especially if an actual sporting goods store pays and sells firearms or, heck, bow, whatever, it all falls under that same umbrella.
Yes, exactly. So, it really wasn't going to do anything in terms of trackable data, and they'd have a very large amount of transactions to sift through and figure out, and it's none of their business. It's violating consumer privacy, in my opinion, but, we just have to play by the rules and kind of roll with the punches the best way we can. But what we did was we waited for direction, and then it was overturned before it even got too far down the rabbit hole. So...
And they were quiet about that too. There was no, we're going back on this. There was no announcement about it. It just kind of disappeared.
Oh, of course. But the day they announced it was a big to-do, right? It had to be on every news, resource out there. But, they don't necessarily like caving to the pressure. But I'm glad because it was a win for us. And at least one time we get to win a little bit. But, and we, like I said, the banks, at least from my standpoint, and we're backed by one of the largest processing banks. They have always been okay with firearms. I don't know what they do in-house different than what Payroc does, but I have it down to a well-oiled machine. So I know that that's kind of the clear differentiator and why my clients like working with me versus some of the other providers. But it's all about that personalized touch and education. So, if I could go out there and do it for all the processors, I absolutely would, but they're not all in a position to listen at this point either. So.
Right. Now, are you exclusive to firearms, or you still help other people with other stuff and you just kind of try to focus on firearms? You don't go after the other business, but if somebody approaches you, by all means, you're not going to say no.
Yeah, so, I'm technically a W-2 of Payroc, so I am an employee. I don't run my own business for them, although that was an option. For whatever reasons, it worked out to stay the way that I'm at. They give me the full volition to run the firearms vertical the way that I do currently. But that being said, I started out kind of working company-fed leads. That's kind of what we do internally. And after a while, I started giving it up because I had more than enough on my plate with the firearms, and it's what I wanted to spend my time doing. But I don't know if I ever told you this story, just kind of how I got into all of it. It's kind of funny because I'm actually born in New York, grew up in California, so two notorious anti-firearm states. And
I can't say much, though, because I was actually born in California, so...
Oh, that is funny. Well, growing up there... I didn't really have an opinion on firearms. The media kind of forces it down your throat that the general citizen shouldn't own firearms. That was the consensus that I saw in the media out there. And you only get one side. You really don't get a lot of opinions unless you go seeking it out. But, met my husband, at the time boyfriend, and we were living together, and he bought his first pistol while we were living together in an apartment in Hollywood, which granted was not a very safe place. I was constantly nervous leaving my apartment, got a dog that I was hoping to turn into a tough looking dude and keep people from approaching me. But in any case, we have this video that pops up every few years on Facebook, and it's me at the gun range in the town I grew up in, and you can visibly see the sweat pouring down my back. Like I'm shaking and was terrified to handle this gun. And again, comes down to lack of education, in my opinion. I didn't know how to safely handle a firearm. I'd never had any experience, never got taught any of it growing up. And once I finally kind of broke that out of that shell, I had no issues with it. As soon as we moved back to Utah, we took our concealed carry class, and I bought my own firearm and learned how to disassemble it and clean it and handle it properly, and the basic rules and in safe ownership. And that changed everything for me. So we were pro Second Amendment, but I was by no means the firearms expert. And then, I
Right.
got hired by Payroc, and this kind of just fell into my lap. And over the years, just absorbed so much information via osmosis, just talking to people. People would call me up and start talking FFLs and SOTs and NFA and 4473s and bound book. And I remember just kind of like for the first bit, just like, yeah, okay. And
Eyes just
like,
glazed over.
like, no, like fake it until you make it, right? And then eventually I figured out what each of those things were, or I would be on Google while I'm talking to them on the phone, like, what is a 4473 and what is a bound book? Kind of just
Yep.
learned it. And, that blossomed into my husband and I, we got in a very blessed place with how busy I was with Payroc, and he was miserable at his job. So I said, you know what? He comes to all the events with me, and all of my clients have been, busting his balls saying, just get your FFL, do something fun. You guys are already in this space. You've got a good network. So it led to us starting our own. And, it's just been such a blessing in a way that I never expected.
My
So,
background actually is kind of similar in that regard. My parents didn't believe in guns, and that was my life growing up. That was never around them. And when I was probably 27 or 28 before I ever fired a gun for the first time.
oh,
And
wow.
yeah, it's weird with where I am today versus you know 10, 12 years ago.
Hmm.
But and I first fired a gun in Illinois, another state that's horrible about guns, and I
Yep.
lived in Chicago at the time. But that had the same kind of concerns that you expressed on the range. How do I approach the gun? How do I know it's safe? How do I handle it? How do I take care of it? And just knowing the mechanics of it to know that it's okay to handle it. It's not gonna do anything to me unless I make it.
Yep.
And not gonna do anything to anybody else unless I make it do that.
Yep.
And that I think is a huge misconception that a lot of people that grew up like we did have, is they don't know, so they only know what the media tells them, which
Right.
is they're bad, they hurt people, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
Unless there's like legit something really wrong with the gun, it's not
Yeah.
going to do anything without the trigger getting pulled.
Yeah.
And anything new or at a range or in a controlled environment isn't going to have anything like that happen.
Right.
And
Exactly.
yeah, it's just all kind of crazy.
Yeah, and honestly, like I said, it comes back to my original point. It doesn't matter if you're talking about a bank, if you're talking about politics, if you're talking about friends and family who disagree with you, you get them out on the range, you show them how to safely handle a firearm, and you get them shooting, even just to try it out for once in their life. They don't have to own a gun, they don't have to be in love with the idea of, everyone owning firearms for their safety. It changes their opinion. I've yet to meet a person who has finally gotten to shoot a gun and handle it in a safe manner that hasn't had their eyes open even just a little bit,
I
and
Yeah,
that's
I kind of relate it to my dad making me learn to change a tire. It's a
yep,
skill that I need to know and I should know, and I hope I never have to use it. To
Right.
me, a firearm and safe handling of a firearm should be treated the same way. It should be a skill that, as a country, because of how we were founded, we encourage everybody to learn. But don't force them to own anything, but encourage them to learn the skill. Because if something does happen, it's a better skill to have and not need
Right.
than to find yourself in a situation where you're all you can be is a victim.
Yep, exactly. Well, and it's even like the stuff that gets regulated, right? Like you're talking about suppressors and things like that with someone who doesn't know anything about it. They think it's truly like Hollywood portrays it, where it's like dead silent, and it's not the
And not
case,
at all.
and so they think it's this big bad thing to own, and it's like, no, it's literally so that I don't blow out my damn eardrums. Like it's nine times out of ten, that's the reason people want to own them, right? Like it's fun and it makes it easier to deal with. It's just overall helps on the recoil and all that stuff too. And so it's again, it's just deconstructing what the media has put into everybody's head. And I can go on till I'm blue in the face, but the other problem we have is nobody wants to listen.
Yeah.
They have their opinions, and you're not allowed to have a reasonable conversation with anyone anymore that's on any sort of opposing side of politics. So, it's just turned into complete chaos, and I hope at some point in time we can get back on track. But, in my little corner of the world, it's fighting for credit card processing so that people can run their business and make more money than they would have made if they were a cash only business. I know personally speaking, before I had my FFL, every gun I bought went on a card. I liked
Yeah.
spending on the money I didn't have than pulling out of savings and get my points and my rewards and all that stuff. And
I was gonna comment on that. Like, the card companies encourage you to use cards because they have all these rewards programs, be it cash back or travel points or whatever it is. So they want you to use the card, but then they don't want you to buy this with it. And it's like,
yeah,
well, they want the best of both worlds, and it's kind of crazy. Like, I personally have a bank account with Chase,
hmm
which I know is not a 2A friendly bank.
they're not anti per se. Like for banking, I've had most of my clients be okay with them, but credit card processing for sure, they're out.
But I
So they
also know that before, I want to say here in Texas, Governor Abbott passed something last year before maybe, where
Mhm.
if a bank elected not to allow, then they wouldn't be allowed any government contracts.
Yes, or I think that they weren't. I don't remember the exact verbiage of it, but my understanding and from what I was told is they weren't allowed to operate in that state because they were discriminating against like
Yeah,
firearms business.
it was something like that. But before Abbott passed that, I know I saw at least a handful of dealers in the groups that we were in post that out of the blue, Chase closed my bank account. They don't
Yeah,
want to let me do guns anymore.
and that was my thing is the issues I've seen with Chase have been regional. Like not everybody, it depends on your area. So I have had a guy who signed up, got his bank account open, even got credit card processing set up. They closed the credit card and then they closed his bank account too. So right in the middle of the sign up with me, he had to go scramble and have us hold his money just in limbo until he got a new account. And it's like, why? Like, first off, there's like porn and gambling and stuff out there, right? And you
Yep.
take money for that all day long.
Yeah,
And that
stuff that is morally divisive.
yes, and it's harmful in another type of way, right? Like and firearms are only harmful in the wrong hands, and it's still federally legal. And also same thing, marijuana is not, but there are banks that will work with them. It doesn't make any sense.
Is the
There's no
distinction there, though, on the marijuana, the FDIC thing? Like, the bank can't be FDIC insured because
I
then
don't
it's
know
federally covered?
side. We don't deal in the marijuana side of credit card processing. And I don't think that you can actually, like, I have yet to see any dispensaries that have taken credit cards. I know through, people like acquaintances and stuff that have gone in that there is a machine, but it's more like a cash advance. So it's basically like an ATM. So
Okay.
you can use your debit card. I don't understand the nuances of it. And trust me, we've all been chomping at the bit because there's a lot of money to be had there. So that's the thing, right? They want the money. They want whatever the popular opinion of politics is saying, yes, you can do this or you can't do this. But firearms is federally legal, protected by the Constitution, yet we still have all these weird biases and issues. So, I still will never understand 100% like the people behind the scenes that are making those decisions. But, I'm just hoping that my specific company continues to stay strong on it and the majority of the big players out there stay involved in it because we need options. I don't want to be the only one that is available to firearms merchants. I think it should level the playing field and be fair. Let people sign up with whoever the heck they want to sign up with. Keep it a free market. It's too much to where these guys don't feel like they're backed into a corner and they end up paying through the nose because of it before they ever come to my doorstep, and then I can hopefully fix some of it, But
do you think any part of it has to do with, I mean, it's all political, it's firearms. That's a given. But do you think any part of it has to do with them trying to get the small businesses in the industry like me out of it and have everything go to like the big boxes like Academy, who, and I don't know if this is true or not, but people say that they data dump to the ATF on a regular basis. Do you think that they're trying to kind of,
I don't know if they're doing that on a credit card processing level, but I certainly feel that way with the ATF.
Right. Well, but it's all political, so could it be like,
I mean,
somehow
it could be, right? Then it comes down to like the whole conspiracy theorist stuff where it's like,
yeah,
we can infer that like obviously they don't like what we do. But I wouldn't say that I see it being specific to small businesses, because with credit card processing, if they're anti 2A, they're anti no matter what size business they are,
Right.
And for like, if they do offer processing to the big box, I'll give you an example. I had a very large client gun range that came across my plate, just happened to give me a shot at doing a savings analysis for them. And we saved them $18,000 a month in credit card fees per month. And that's not just one client that's had that. I've had people come across my plate, with like 10,000 a month in savings, 5,000 a month. And granted, you have to be doing a lot of volume to get to that type of level. But
Right.
the fact that they were being taken advantage of to that extent is insane.
Yeah, I mean, that's the amount you're saving people, the amount that a lot of the small dealers do per month.
Yeah.
It's when you really look at it, because there's so many home-based dealers, and they don't do high volume like that. Some do. Some are, I don't know how they do it home-based, and they do crazy numbers. But a lot of the home-based tend to be the smaller side of things, and they tend to be the ones that don't know where to go to get this information. And I
Right.
think that's one great thing about like how you and I met through the FFL dealer groups on Facebook, where we vet everybody and we make sure that they're a dealer, and there's no bad question for somebody to ask.
Right. To that point, there is a course that ended up being where a lot of people I talk to have used them as well. These small home based, just starting out dealers. It's through Rocket FFL, where Ryan Kleckner lays it out in layman's terms. Like he walks you through the FFL process. He even has an ATF compliance course that delves in really deep into each of the laws and regulations. And, because unless they're you, a lot of these people don't understand what they're looking at when they're reading all, verbatim from the ATF's like website. So he laid it out like every little detail, and it's amazing. And so I do end up talking to a lot of people there. And he and I ended up collaborating to, put out some information about the credit card processing challenges. And I think that that's kind of helping change it for these smaller dealers. They understand coming out the gates that they're going to run into issues. But there's still tons more that don't ever come across that course. And they're truly blind to what's going to happen to them when they're ready to start delving into banking and credit card processing. And it's sad.
Well, and it just stuff in general. As a new dealer, I had somebody, they posted a question in the forum yesterday, and I answered their question, and then they messaged me independently on Facebook, and I was on the road at the time, so I'm like, can you talk? And I sent him my phone number. Next thing I know, I'm on the phone for 30 minutes with this new dealer, talking about all the nuances, basically, of how the rules and regs are just making it hard for us to keep our heads on straight.
Yes.
It was the Cerakote, the manufacturing, the if I put a slide on it, is it manufacturing? Can I do this? Can I do that? And
Yeah.
they have so much stuff that's if then.
Yes.
And
Agreed.
it's contingent. And
Agreed. Sometimes it like kind of contradicts itself too. So it's like,
I
you
have
know,
literally, I'd have to go back through because I sent screenshots to my IOI. I literally found contradicting language in writing, not just an
oh,
interpretation, but contradictory language in writing on their website,
yeah.
I don't know, 3 months ago. And I'm like, well, which is it?
Yeah.
And I don't remember what it was. My interpretation, I think, ended up being what my IOI sided with, but it was just one of those like, how can you say this and say this when they don't?
The opposites. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is like they almost are making it scary for you to want to operate because you don't know if you're doing something that's breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
And your IOI could tell you something all day long, but is that going to hold up in court? And that's what it comes
Yep.
down to too. You'd hope that they'd see the contradictions and understand that like you weren't doing anything out of malintent, but nobody wants to take that damn chance. This is their life, there's fines and jail on the line. It's not worth it. So,
Well, and it's kind of like if you don't see the speed limit sign, that doesn't mean that's not the speed limit. And the
right.
regulations are the same way. Just because you don't know the reg or you haven't read that reg or ruling, that doesn't mean it's not there and you have to comply.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've seen happen more often than not with some of these recent rulings is the P80 ruling that came out, for example, back in August of last
Mhm.
year. A lot of people were like, well, I don't deal in P80s, I don't need to read that. But there was stuff buried in there that impacts anybody that does manufacturing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people didn't realize that and didn't understand that, no, like, the ATF actually, I don't know, I'm going to say this very often, but the ATF actually did get at least one thing right in that ruling. And that has to do with engraving markings
Mhm.
when you manufacture a gun out of parts as a dealer.
Yeah.
And the other parts of the ruling, I don't know that they really hurt anything, but if this ruling gets overturned, which I don't know that anybody's fighting it right now or not, but if it gets overturned, people don't realize that, okay, we have to go back to marking stuff. We have
Yeah.
to go back to some of this other stuff that actually was good changes to the small people, because to be
Right.
able to mark a gun, like I think I looked it up the other day, I spent $4,500 on a laser engraver
Yeah.
because you have to mark it in a certain way to a certain depth,
Yep.
and not just anybody can do it.
Yeah.
So, like it made it easier for the little guy to actually compete in the building world.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we are in the same boat. We have our laser and we've had a few people inquire. They've had, 80% lowers that they've built at home and they built the gun at home, which they can do on their own. They can buy parts, they can do what they need
Which
to
is
do.
still legal. That did not change in that ruling, and a lot of people think it did, but it did not change in that ruling.
No, but coming to our place of business and wanting a Cerakote job or anything, then all of a sudden it becomes a matter of I have to mark it after so if it's so long in my possession. And that was important for us to understand.
Yeah,
And
I
the
think, isn't that one thing that you called me about?
Yep, because we wanted
Yeah.
to make sure we were 100% understanding of the actual law around it so that there was no issues. Plus, our IOI isn't as responsive as we'd like. So,
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we suffer as dealers. We're obligated to follow all these rules and regulations, and they have compliance officers out in the field, but depending on where you're at, they don't respond.
yeah. Well, and again, it comes back to you've seen people on those groups too say, I've talked to my IOI, and you'll get 5 different answers for the same question from the ATF directly. Like, just depends on who the agent was. And a
Yep,
lot of people know what they're doing.
I actually had the ATF set up behind me at a gun show, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the guys was in training. Now, that said, he's been in training at this point for a year. Us as dealers are expected to know everything day one or we go to jail.
Yeah.
But this dude has been in training for a year. So, eat, drink, breathe, gun regs for a year. Somebody asked him about, it was either a Form 1 or a Form 4, which the IOIs and the compliance officers don't deal much in the NFA, but it was a very basic question. It had something to do with who can use it, trust versus individual, and whether he should Form 1 it as a trust or as an individual, and what the difference was.
Right.
And this guy, who has worked for the ATF for a year, didn't know the answer.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised, though, to be honest.
And I mean, I wasn't going to let the person walk away not getting the right answer, so I chimed in and educated this guy in training. But, like, I'm sorry, if you don't understand stuff after a year when that's your job, I don't know how they're so hard on us as dealers when a lot of us do it part-time. I mean, I know that your husband is full-time in it now, right?
Yeah, but I mean, that's relative, right? Like, we're still real small and, it comes in
Right.
spurts. We'll get a bunch of jobs in 1 week and then we'll be dead for 3 weeks. So,
Right, it's a
I'm kinda
it's a volume deal.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm
it
like, you're
comes
gonna
down.
work for me part-time and you're gonna do that when you have jobs come in, and then it's just gonna work out. Synergy.
Yeah. So, but it comes down to a volume thing, and if
Yeah, 100%.
if you're not doing volume, if you're a home-based dealer, and you might transfer 100 guns in a year, that's like one every 3 days. That's nothing
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, And I'm down to that volume now, but that's because I'm doing so much on the Cerakote side, and I'm doubling down on the laser side.
That's
But
what we play into, just because of how uncertain it is with, these audits, and like, you make one mistake and it's done for you forever. And
Yep.
it's insane. I don't know any other industry that has that kind of pressure. Maybe doctors, you make a mistake and you kill someone, that's that. But even then, they have
They can
protocols and stuff.
consult, they can whatever, they got other alternatives, yeah.
Yeah, we're black and white. It's like and I mean, I understand within reason certain mess ups, right? Like,
Yeah, anything willful or intentional, by all means, those people should not be dealers.
Yeah.
And I'll say that all day long, because that's what makes it harder on those of us that are trying to do what's right. And,
Right.
But we also get law enforcement that aren't enforcing what's already there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw my post or my video I did, but
Oh, the ID.
yeah, I literally walked a guy up to the police at a gun show with a fake ID, told the cops he just tried to buy a gun from me with his fake ID. They let him go.
It's insane, and I know that everyone's always calling for more control, and it's like, if they even just enforced 75% of the stuff that comes across their plate, they'll enforce
Not
it
even
on the
that.
dealers. They'll enforce it on the dealers all day long, but not on the criminals. Like, I don't understand that mentality at all.
Yeah. Well, and in that case, all those cops had to do was detain the guy and call the feds. It's not like they had to do the arrest.
Yeah.
Make the ATF come deal with the guy. That's what they're there for, right? It's a federal thing.
Yeah.
That's one actually that I ended up emailing a member of Ted Cruz's staff that I actually sold a gun to last year sometime, and he said he's sending it off to the I don't remember what he said. Somebody in the Judiciary Committee, because he agrees that it's ridiculous. Like, that shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
While at the same time they're trying to jam more laws down our throat.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.